Summertime, and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich, and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry.
Mrs.Coreania Hayman Carter was singing this same song, Summertime, professionally more than 50 years ago with a touring company of Porgy and Bess. Hers is an exceptional voice even now at the age of 91. It has opened many doors and taken her many places. She has had opportunities that the daughter of a small-town preacher in Maryland would not expect to ever have happened to them.
I really didn't know if I was going to continue to go to college or not, because I knew my father wasn't able to send us all. But when I got this scholarship, I was thrilled to death. I was so thrilled. And it was one of those things that just happened. I guess it was just in the books for me to get this particular scholarship, and for the bishop to be in the audience at the time when I was singing. So, I mean, everything just worked out, it just worked out beautifully.
She attended Wilberforce University in Ohio and then went on to Juilliard in New York. It was there she met a young chaplain in the U.S. Air Force named Julius Carter. A short romance, and they were married. One dreaming of having his own church, the other of having a career on stage.
After I finished college, then I got married, and then not knowing that I didn't think it was going to change my life as much as it did, but it did.
In 1947, while still in the Air Force, Reverend Carter started looking for his first church.
That church, it was a hall. It wasn't a church. It was a hall. It just so happened that my husband was in the real estate office at the time. This man came in and was putting this hall up for sale. He was a white gentleman, and it was a group that used that hall were from the Ku Klux Klan.
The piano for that first church was donated by baseball legend Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in the major leagues that same year. For a few more years, Mrs. Carter continued to perform and travel. But the church was growing, and eventually Reverend Carter said to his wife,
he said to me, I'm not asking you to give up your profession. He said, but I will need you. I will need you. So what could I say?
Meanwhile, Mrs. Carter's sister Lillian, who was also in showbiz, went on to win a Tony Award on Broadway and appear in the soap opera One Life to Live for 17 years.
My husband would tell the people, he gets hungry at 12 o'clock, so he has to get home to get something to eat.
The neighborhood Mrs. Carter and her husband lived in and established their church was unique in New York City. Adsley Park was home to a who's who of black entertainers and sports stars. Among them were Count Basie, Lena Horne, and Billie Holiday.
The gray house, that was James Brown's house. That's where James Brown lived. So we saw him quite frequently, and he would donate to the church. He would say to my husband, oh, Rev, come over, I have something for you today. Come over. He'd come over, he'd go over, and he'd give him $100 and put it in church today.
It wasn't long before the Carters' mission expanded to the point where they needed a new church. And then they did something never done before. They built a retirement center on top of the new church.
Well, it was my husband's idea. He said people had been so good to him down through the years, so he wanted to give back to the people.
While her husband led the congregation, Mrs. Carter led the choir. And for 22 years, she managed the retirement center above the church. Sadly, her husband passed in 1984. But Mrs. Carter still is an active participant in the church, and over the years has touched many lives.
think she's been great for everything that she has done here at this church, because all our children was raised here. And now they're in another church that my husband used to pastor, but they still working and they got their training here from Mrs. Carter.
She done a lot of things for me. She helped me out with my problems. She would like let's say if I got in trouble in school, or like if I felt sad or disappointed about things, she would help me a lot. Yeah.
Carter, that's my mama. That's all I can say. She's my mom. I grew up in this church. I grew up under them.
No, you have a first seat. But I must say to you, that's a rough trip to go and come right back.
Well, no, I can take it.
All right, y'all heard it?
I can take it.
You heard it.
I can take it.
Okay.
The Reverend and I drove 5 times to California and back, so I...
Okay.
Well, I couldn't really describe her voice because that's how beautiful and how rich it is and still is at this late stage in her life.
I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today, because you cared for me in such a special way. That's why I'll praise you, I'll lift you up, and I'll magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise.
We will never know, of course, how far Mrs. Carter could have gone in the world of entertainment. But in the very real world of her church and her community, she is freely offered to it not just a beautiful voice, but a very, very beautiful life.
I'm telling the Lord that I love Him. I love Him. You've done so much. You've been so good, and I will praise you. I will always praise you. I'll bless, and because you have blessed me. You have blessed me. You've done good things for me. And now I'm praising you because I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today. My heart is filled with love.